Your mic is muted. Can they hear us?
We're good.
Hey, this is Jared and Nate over at E-Carrier Check. Excited to bring you a Friday Live. We've got a lot to talk about. A lot of questions that came up this week that we're pretty excited about.
Yep.
Nate, how was your week? Tell me more about your week.
Well, it was a short week, obviously with the 4th on Monday, but it's honestly been kind of slow, and I wonder if it's just the holiday, we just had, but it's been a good week. Still had a lot of good questions, which is good that people are still out there grinding.
Yeah, absolutely. Nate, as far as E-Carrier Check, we obviously offer a lot of different services, but primarily our goal is to create sourcing opportunities or growth opportunities.
Yep.
Talk to us about what do we show in E-Carrier Check in order to help people grow?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and honestly, this is some of the things that I think what sets us differently than other software companies and anything in the freight industry, right? We're here to help you find these leads to carriers, brokers, and shippers. I think just to add to that too is just our support. We want to try to help you as much as we can. So we're not that type of software company that you sign up and we send you on your way. No, we want to interact with you. We want to help you, talk strategies, whatever it may be. So.
Yeah. So we lined up some questions that came across our table today, and we're going to break them down. As far as when people want to see what E-Carrier Check does, how do they see it? Can you go through that?
Yeah, stop by ecarriercheck.com, just search that, right? And then you'll see get a free demo. We got demos every Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern, Tuesdays and Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. And we'll be adding Q&A to that, so you'll be able to see our communities on Wednesdays. We have a Q&A on Wednesdays for our subscribers. So we're going to try to open that up to the public, and you can see our community. Honestly, our community is insane.
Yeah.
I mean, we have so many connections and people connecting with others. It's insane.
Yeah. I think something that's really interesting is just the diversity within our, within our community. We've got carriers, we've got brokers, we've got dispatchers, we got some factoring people, we got some insurance companies, a couple recruiters. So very diverse community, which I love. They all support each other. I think encouragement is huge in today's world. And so I love that. You know what I mean? I'm a big fan of that. So if you guys have questions, obviously throw them in the chat. We'll get into them. But Nate, let's kick off with some of the chats, some of the questions that you wrote down, and let's talk through those.
Definitely. Thanks to everyone on TikTok. If you are interested, check out our YouTube live. We're live on YouTube as well, and Facebook and LinkedIn. So, and good morning to everyone here. Yeah, so we've had some interesting questions, and we wrote down when we talked earlier, this week, what's on our schedule to, for this week, and what does it look like? A lot of the questions that kind of came up from our subscribers is what's the process of finding shippers? So we get a lot of newer freight brokers, carriers, along those lines. So we get a lot of newer people just jumping into the industry, and they're unsure of what their process is and how to begin. So maybe we can shed some light on some of those people today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I found shippers. Let me break this down a couple different ways. First maybe we talk about when I was a carrier, when I was in carrier sales versus being in freight broker, and then we'll just kind of dive into what does it look like once you get a shipper, right? First and foremost, you've got to identify, a lot of people as a carrier, right? You need to identify brokers, which we show on E-Carrier Check, right? You probably need the load boards to start, right? The goal would be is that the load board is your last case scenario, last result, right? Okay. But I think what I did was first is obviously I understood our costs because I came into an existing carrier, so I understood our costs really well. I also understood the network that we were running, and then what I mean by that is I wasn't chasing going, oh man, I'm going to get paid a weird amount to go to Washington. I knew that I stayed between the Rockies and the Mississippi to Canada to Mexico. That was our nugget, right? I didn't go outside of those walls. I loved this area. And the reason why I love that area is, in the major cities that we always got to, and there's not a lot of major cities in the Midwest, but there's a few: Denver, St. Louis, Dallas, Houston, right? There's a handful. You get up to Bismarck occasionally, right? North Dakota, nobody wants to go there. But I always had 3 to 5 good, solid freight brokers that I knew up in those areas that had local freight, Local brokers have local freight. But I also had 3 to 5 to 7 direct shippers up in that area,
Right.
right? So, and how I did that, once, I'm either emailing, I'm calling, I'm saying, hey, I've got some flatbeds in your area this Thursday, Friday, and next Monday. You know, do you have anything? We also have 4 foot drops, right? 4 foot tarps is what I mean by that. And so we would always, you're calling those people and being proactive with, hey, I've got these people in your area. It wasn't really a sales process. It was like, hey, you can use our services if you'd like. Let's go through the process and get set up. Now, a couple things that I would do as far as, obviously every shipper, whoever that is, direct shippers, brokers, whatever it may be, you need to check their credit, right?
Yeah.
And then from there, you really just need to start to build a relationship. And that's one, step at a time.
Right.
You're not going to get dedicated lanes tomorrow,
Yep.
right? You need to go prove yourself. You need to go run a lane, go run a load, quote a shipment, quote 10 shipments, whatever it may be, and start to prove yourself with the shipper, right?
Right.
So, and that let's just break it down to, like, from a freight broker standpoint. From a freight broker standpoint, I'd go out, I'd find shippers, and in my particular case, I was more of a spot market broker. However, we did, things like Michael Neem. Shout out to Michael Neem. But we did kind of full scale, full services, and so I was calling different types of people. But in the spot market, where a lot of people sit, not so much. You would get a shipper, and the goal is to quote them.
Right.
Let's get a carrier on this thing. Let's make our margin and quote them. And if you're not hearing from them, then you need to keep touching base with them.
Right. So it's all about consistency. Like I mentioned, we're trying to shed some light on the newer freight brokers and carriers out there. Trying to find these shippers.
Mm,
Being consistent. How you mentioned, quote some shippers. Get your name out there. Be consistent.
yeah.
I think that's huge. We talk about relationships a lot here.
Mm,
Build those relationships to help you. And I think that's what made you pretty successful back in your day,
Yeah.
was building relationships. So.
yeah. And it was the little things too. When I got set up with the shipper, I would always send them, obviously I would send them, hey, here's our insurance, here's this. And a lot of that was done by email. When I first started, we were doing it by fax. Let's not talk about my age. But, I would also send them in the mail a handwritten note.
Right.
Hey, I really enjoyed our conversation. I'm looking forward to our relationship growing. Thanks for your time, Jared. And that's literally how it worked. And they get a note, and maybe they get some notepads, right? Or, and maybe even, hey, we just moved this load in your industry. I just wanted to take a picture of our truck because we're pretty proud of, A, how clean our trucks are, how nice our equipment is, the pride in our drivers, right? That you're talking about just adding value. What you do day in and day in out is not rocket science here. You're just trying to build a relationship, build some trust, and communicate.
Right. A couple of things that you mentioned, I love that you put it this way. You're almost 10 degrees off, right? And 10 degrees may seem like a lot to others, but it's just a little bit of a tweak. And that's okay. You might be, like you said, you might be one phone call away from changing your life.
Oh, man.
So make those calls, stay consistent.
Yeah.
Make some mistakes. Like,
Yeah.
I had that conversation with the broker. You're not going to know where you're at or how you're going to sound if you don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what Michael Neem said. Just do it.
Yeah.
Get out there, make some calls.
You just got to go.
Yeah.
The sooner you get those no's, the sooner you get rejection, the more used to it you're going to get.
Right.
I always, from a standpoint, when I was, selling as a freight broker, I knew if I put 50 boxes on a checklist on a piece of paper like you're holding,
Yep.
and I would make a bunch of calls, I knew that I was going to get a bunch of no's. But those no's either A, taught me something, and I reevaluated how I was talking to those people, or I was, reevaluating that. But B, I knew that I would find somebody. So I really think, you get to 50 no's, you're going to get a yes,
Yeah.
right? So, and don't take it personal. You just got to keep consistent.
Yep.
So what do you do when you find a shipper? Start trying to quote something.
Mm-hmm.
Try to start to build trust. And you can do that a lot of different ways, by connecting on LinkedIn,
Yep.
sending them personalized messages, sending them pictures of loads that you're moving. There's a lot of different ways to build trust, and you just need to open up that connection.
Yep.
And if it's being forced, sometimes when they're forced relationships, they never really turned out either A, long term, or B, it just was tough.
Right.
This is a humongous industry. I promise you, there's somebody out there for you.
Yeah.
Somebody needs your service. You just need to be consistent and continue to look for that.
Right.
So,
Definitely. And I think, it's always I feel like it's always going to be a no if you don't pick up the phone. So you never know unless you pick up that phone.
yeah,
right?
you got to
So,
do action, action,
yeah,
action, action. You can't stop.
Yeah. So this kind of leads me into my next question here. That is personalizing messages. You even talked about handwriting personal notes. Talk to us about personalizing messaging, like text, emails. You even said you faxed. Talk to us about like even cold calls, right?
Yeah. Hey, Dan, what's up, man? It's good to see you.
Morning.
I'm glad you're on. We a lot of people are all about automation and no touch marketing, and we utilize constant contact, right? And it's just one of those things. You set up a cool flow chart and it goes out and it just does it for you. Now there's value that can be driven from that. However, if we'll go down the road of all the people we deal with. If you're a dispatcher and you're sending out 20,000 emails to people and it says, hey, looking for owner operators, got opportunities. You're not going to get anywhere, right? You really need to personalize it. And what that sounds like is I'm going to go on eCarrier Check. I'm going to find a bunch of reefers or something maybe that I want to specialize in, right? Flatbeds, vans, or maybe I want to specialize in, a certain geographic area or something to that extent, which you can all do on eCarrier Check. And then it just says, you go out to those reefers, maybe there's 100 of those guys, and you write a personalized message. Hey, I'm a dispatcher focused in on reefer, movement across the United States, and I'd like an opportunity to see if I could, help you with your administration and helping you find trucks, on helping you billing, on those things. So I really think that not only a personalized message needs to be driven toward the people that you're looking for, like freight brokers, for instance. Freight brokers need to, don't just send out a blast out email to 1,000 shippers that you just got off of some, website. Go on to our site, do some research. You can see all these shippers. We have a weird amount of shippers in our database, and you can see not only where they're shipping to, you can see the equipment they're using, and then personalize either A, your phone call, or B, your email. And I still don't think that there's anything wrong with email. To be honest with you, we're getting so many robocalls anymore. Nobody really answers their phone.
Yeah.
Right. So sometimes connecting in an email saying, hey, I have carriers that are in Columbus, Ohio every week, and we specifically work in the HVAC industry, and I'd like to see if I could get set up with you. Yeah. And leave it at that.
Right. And it's insane what eCarrier Check can do, because you mentioned how we can show you what some of these carriers are specializing in, such as industry, right? So if this carrier is doing logs and pulls, well, hey, thank you, Mr. Newer, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, why not look at these carriers and say, oh, they specialize in logs and pulls? Well, hey, guess what? You can put that into an email, and that's going to catch their eye, right? You know what I mean? And same with shippers. So, we give you a lot of weird information that can help you almost build some confidence with these sales calls.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You're kind of already cutting to, a little bit of the detail that you would have in maybe some of the first few questions. Right. Definitely. With that shipping manager. So if you can get on our site, do some sourcing, do some research, really drive and dive down into some of the depths there, and then make some calls, and really try to hone in on, that personalized functionality that you can get with our site.
Right. And like again, I'm going to say it again, you're almost 10 degrees off, right? Maybe like you mentioned, personalizing these emails, these calls, take that 10 degrees and let's try it a different way, right? I'm not saying change your strategy up like completely, but there might be a little bit off, which is fine. We all are a little bit off some days.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
It's how we learn.
And speaking of being off a little bit, it is your birthday. So I'm super jacked for you, man.
Thank you.
Happy birthday for those of you who are watching. It is Nate's birthday. I also think, and I know maybe we have a few questions in this, but I think that personalizing just takes you a little bit different than everybody else. Honestly, everybody is trying automated functionality where they're outsourcing just everything. Doesn't matter what it is, emails, texts, phone calls. I've seen it all.
And they're getting this reoccurring every day.
Yeah.
And, so it's gotta be different. You got to differentiate yourself.
You got to
so,
personalize yourself.
Definitely. So we get a lot of carriers, obviously, too. We're pretty diverse around here, like Jared mentioned. So we get a lot of carriers. So, how can carriers find loads differently besides the load boards?
That's a good question. Obviously the load boards, I had a call this week. We had a nice, I had a 30-minute session with the carrier this week. That's just getting started out of Florida. They got some flatbeds, they got some vans, and actually two, to be honest with you. They got a flatbed and a van. And he said, well, obviously I've been in the freight industry for a while. I haven't really been into dispatching, but I know that the company I used to work for get all their freight off truck stop and dad. And there's nothing wrong with utilizing a load board platform, right?
Yeah.
But you're going to end up chasing,
right,
constantly, right? You're going to chase freight. You're going to get, you're just going to be chasing constantly, right? So, we talked about this a little bit earlier. Is you've got to diversify your client mix, or at least your revenue streams. And if you look at each way of getting those revenue streams, I'll give you an example. Truck stop and dat, load boards are a revenue stream. That's where you get some of that revenue, right? The next revenue stream would be a direct shipper, right? You're calling direct shippers. You're trying to get 2 or 3. There's a possibility that direct shippers, although it's going to be slow to get those people going, and they may not have freight that's in the right direction that you need to go, are going to be the best thing that you've done. So take the time to get those direct shippers going, because it's a nice layer of revenue where you're building a relationship. You're emailing them every week, telling them, hey, I've got 2 trucks in Nashville this week, 1 van, 1 flatbed, and here's where I'm going with it. I'm trying to move it down to either Texas or back down to Florida, or maybe, so there's a revenue stream, right? The next revenue stream is really going to be, it's going to be finding brokers that aren't on load boards. According to TIA, there's, 10 to 12,000 active, brokers, right? In our database, there's a weird amount of brokers. There's some 70,000. Now, not all of them are active, but, we built in an automated function where you can personalize an email and send out emails to these brokers.
Yep.
And tell them where you're going. Tell them what you want. Communication is key. And so now you've got 3 different revenue streams. You've got, the load board, which is more of a Band-Aid, and it'll help you get up and running, right? You've got, the direct shippers, which sometimes don't feel like they're paying off, but I promise you, over the long run, as you continue the communication, those things like that will be beneficial. And then the last, but certainly not least, is the brokers that are, not on load boards.
Right.
We've made a lot of calls to brokers, and, a lot of brokers are saying the same thing when we call those people.
Yeah.
They want relationships. Yeah. They don't have time to post it up on load boards. Some of them have built their own load boards, right? Yeah. Some of these small to mid-size, or mid-size to large, brokers have their own load boards. And so you really have got to take the time to just call and build relationships, and call and build relationships, and keep track of things. This is why we have the list functionality. This is why we give you notes. This is why we keep you organized in eCarrier Check, is we really want to help you with, hey, I talked to these 5 brokers this week. Those conversations happen real easy because guess what? Brokers answer phones, right? Shippers, that's a little tougher of a conversation. You're going to have to probably call them 2, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times.
Yeah.
And that's a different one. The load boards, they already have their freight up there. It's already on there.
Right.
So it's one of those things where I think you have to find loads differently, and that would be how you do it. I also think there's a lot of loads on social media.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's crazy. I'm on LinkedIn. I think everyone should get on LinkedIn. In my mind, it's one of the better platforms for professional networking. I love TikTok too, by the way. Shout out to our TikTok users. But I'm a big fan of, connecting with shippers on LinkedIn, especially, that middle bucket. We talked about direct shippers, right? Those guys, as you're, hey, Nate's the shipping manager of ABC Manufacturing. I'm going to look him up on LinkedIn and see if I can connect with him.
Yeah.
See if I can start posting pictures of my trucks, my loads, my hey, here's something that we're doing now. This is kind of fun. We do, full visibility platform, or hey, you're going to get a personalized call, or B, we have automated billing that's really simple, and this is how we make it smooth for a shipper, right? So that's going to be, and I just went a little bit further than
No,
what
this is
we're taking,
good.
but this is what I was talking about is
Yeah.
how do you find more loads? It's going to be,
Right.
really taking the time to do that. Ryan Holiday says, "Good morning, guys." Says, "Shout out to you. Quick question: how do you see a potential recession affecting the freight industry? What can I do as a freight broker to protect myself in case of a slowdown?" This is such an interesting question. Good morning. Good morning there, Junuka. I think I might have said that
Yeah.
right.
Good morning.
But this is actually one of the questions. We actually have gotten this question a handful of times. And this kind of comes back to something that Nate's an expert in my opinion. Nate used to come from the mental health industry. And whether you were dealing with, I love that. Happy birthday, Nate. I love that they're
Thanks,
coming
guys.
in. You got a good crowd. um, when it comes to dealing with things when you feel overwhelmed, when you feel like anxiety, when you feel, those points, what can you control? Can I control the recession?
No.
Can I control inflation? Can I control what I'm paying at the pump every day or what I'm buying food for my family? Can I control any of that?
No.
Right. What I can control is I control how many calls I can make. I can control how many emails I'm sending. I can control how many relationships I'm building. If you're going to make, and there's some sharks out there, we deal with sharks already at eCarrier Check. We have some of the most amazing brokers on our site that I've ever seen. And these people are friggin' calling every day. And when they feel like stopping, they go 10 more. Carriers have to do the same damn thing. They constantly, you want to know why the brokerage industry grew so much further over COVID? Was that carriers aren't calling. They always just got their loads off load boards, right? Brokers are hungry. They want to feed their families, and they control what their actions are.
Yeah. I think that's the really good input there. It's a really good question by Ryan there. We got another good question here. What's the best way to put all of the package together?
Maybe go into deeper detail of what kind of package you're talking about.
Yeah, definitely.
But I definitely think, when it comes to dealing with this recession, we're either A, in it, or B, it's getting ready to get weird.
Yeah.
I've worked through a couple different essentially weird times. In 2008, I was working for a carrier. We were averaging, 1,200 loads a day. 1,200 loads a day. Insane.
Yeah.
And I'm not exaggerating. I remember this in 2008, October, it fell out and there were 600 loads a day.
Wow.
So, for you carriers that are out there, that are watching, that are on here today, right? A, you need to know your costs better than anything. You need to know who you're partnering with your factoring company to make sure that they have the best interest at heart, right? There's some weird wording in factoring that you guys need to make sure you're playing with, okay? You need to know your costs, and you need to have a sock. For times like this, you've got to have a dirty sock full of cash, or you need to start building up that cost. That cost. But I really am a big believer that you control, no different than how you deal with anxiety or how we deal with overwhelm, right? Write a plan and do it every day. I tell you what, one of the best books that I've ever read is Darren Hardy, Compound Interest. If you get a chance, it is the most amazing book you'll ever hear. And he talks about a guy that spends 30 minutes a day on his business, specifically on outsourcing, trying to find new customers. And he does this every day for 30 minutes. No matter what, every day he gets it for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, maybe 60 minutes. And then there's the guy that maybe does it 3 or 4 times a week, right? And, I think, what's interesting is if I go to the gym once a month for 9 hours, or if I go to the gym for 30 minutes every day, right, I'm going to see better results the 30 minutes a day,
right,
versus 9 hours of me just killing myself.
Yep.
So you've got to make sure that you control what you can control. And watching CNN and Fox and all this crazy media, believe me, I know we're in a recession.
Yeah.
I just paid $85 to fill up my minivan.
Yeah.
What in the
What
world?
can you do? Yeah.
It's a minivan,
Mm-hmm.
but I can control my output. I can control my attitude.
Yep.
I can control, the people that I surround myself with.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So control those things that you can, because this industry is so damn big. It is so friggin' huge. You just got to be able to control those things.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that because, like I mentioned earlier, that next call could really change your life. If you're thinking about, giving up, which, like I mentioned, we meet with so many newer, people in this industry, like brokers, dispatchers, and carriers. We really want to help them and push them the best we can. Make that call, just grind it out. It's going to take some time to get your feet under you, but don't give up. One of the things we talk about is find your why, right? So, and exactly what you said. Control what you can control. Control your, yourself first of all. But we're all in this together in a way. There's other people like out there just like yourself that are struggling. So, and that's what makes our community so great. Is you can hook up with some people that are struggling with the same things you are, and you guys will be able to link up and talk it out, talk with us, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So,
It's kind of interesting when you say, find your why. We talk a lot about that. And, the people that we see that are successful, and we have brokers, we have dispatchers, we have carriers that kind of come and go. And to be honest with you, we've built a lot of great relationships in the last 16, 17 months. And, we've seen them succeed. We've seen them fail. And I can tell you the one thing that makes the people that are successful is they have a big why.
Yep.
They have a big understanding of what's driving them.
right.
Their family needs the support. They've burned the boats. They've left the island. They're on the island. They're not going back to where they were from. They have to make it work.
Yep.
They have to be disciplined, and they've got to be you've got to be able to just grind every day.
Yeah.
And I know that's tough. Believe me, I deal with weight issues, and man, my kids get nuggets, I'm going to finish them. I love nuggets. I love chicken nuggets. I love sweet and sour sauce. I love chicken nuggets. But I know deep down in my heart that if I don't stop that, I'm going to have a heart attack later in my life, or I'm not going to live as long because I ate, more chicken nuggets than most humans ever should.
Right.
And I love chicken nuggets. You know what I mean? But I think you've got to really just get a handle on your discipline. And I personally, here's how I do my discipline is I send myself 15 texts a day. Hey, take a water break. Hey, you're doing a great job. Or, hey, make sure you stand up and walk around. Or, hey, did you make your 10 calls today?
Yeah, definitely. That's funny that you say that because we all have some sort of way to motivate ourselves and hold ourselves accountable, and that's your way. So maybe that doesn't work for people, which is fine, right? And maybe my way is just, maybe waking up in the morning and telling myself in the mirror, how am I going to be better today, right?
Yeah.
I may not send text messages to myself, but I think another good thing too with our interviews that we got going on here, if you ever feel like giving up, watch our video, go to our YouTube channel, right, at eCarryCheck, and watch the interview with Donald because he was at one point where he felt, he even took some time off,
Oh, yeah.
got himself together. Like he almost took a week off, right? Just to kind of get himself together, get his, his mental health back on where it should be. He never gave up. And I'm pretty sure he's doing really good right now. We should probably, link up with him and see how things are going. But he's a really good example of what's my why. Things aren't going so good. Let's take a break and let's get back after it. I'm not going to give up. So really good interview.
Yeah, feed your mind. That's important. That really is.
Definitely.
So Ryan, thank you for the question. It's funny, we had that question on here. We get this a lot actually, so I'm glad you did that. You ask, what's the best way to put it all together? A shipper carrier broker agreement, etc. I recommend, and we have the ability. You can actually email, so we can send you, a carrier broker agreement or shipper broker agreement. My recommendation is that you just have two different PDFs. They're really simple. It's got your carrier agreement or broker agreement in there. It's got your W-9, your insurance. It's going to have your, depending on what you do, it'll have, your bond. It'll have all that aspect so that you can get kind of set up with those shippers and send you over what they need. And then as far as the carrier agreement, those are things that there are some cool automated websites out there like carrier packets, things like that. Shout out to Chris Jolly. He's got this cool, I think it's called Carrier Broker. That's something that I find kind of interesting. Um, but there's some automated functionality that you can get that really helps people with not only keeping those agreements in place, but making sure that you're updating them when you need. Because I promise you, depending on what you do, if you're a carrier or a broker, really at the end of the day, you'll probably get 1,000 friggin' carriers signing up with you as your freight broker. And it's hard to keep up with, well, whose insurance certificate do I need? And that's what some of these TMSs do. And some of those things. So, but I would recommend just making them, one PDF each, and then go from there. Now, if you need, some wording, maybe hop on and get a lawyer, or there's some ones that are online. We also have some as well that we can share with you. So email us at support@ecarriercheck.com. We can definitely help you with some of that paperwork. So
yeah, definitely.
Do we have time for? Do we have any more questions today, Nate?
Not at the moment. I see we got 10 people on today. So if you have any questions for Jared or myself, throw them in the chat. And while you guys are maybe thinking of a question, just remember, go to ecarriercheck.com, sign up for a demo there every Monday, 6 p.m. Eastern, Tuesdays and Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, and then obviously our Wednesday Q&As for our subscribers, and we'll soon open that up to the public so that way you can see our amazing community. We try to stay pretty active on our social media accounts, so find us on TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook, you name it, we're on it. So we're trying to grow our social media life. It's going really well, so we enjoy it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Nate, I really enjoyed today. I like breaking things down that we get a lot from the users. Yeah. I don't know if we have anything else, but I just want to wish you a happy birthday.
Thank you. Thanks everyone too.
You're a big part of eCarrier Check and eCarrier Check success, and so obviously you can tell there's people that get on and love to deal with you and love to talk. So thank you for that. I really appreciate.
Love being here.
So, guys, we're gonna let you go today. If you have questions, throw them out at us. We love answering questions. We'll be live again next Friday at 11 Eastern, and we appreciate it. Have a great weekend, everybody. Okay.